The SMRPG remake is incredibly faithful to the original, but many fans, including me, were expecting more. In fairness, the new visuals are fantastic, the remastered music slaps, the FMVs are adorable, and Nintendo has done so much right with this title. But I'm greedy. I want more. So Nintendo, here's my personal wish list. Do not be afraid to steal these ideas. I'm even going to do a little bit of theory crafting later in the video to tell you exactly what I would do with the old characters and some new ones. I just want to get you on the right track. And of course, if you have something you want to see in the game, let me know in the comments. My first disappointment about this game is the difficulty level. Having now played through this game 3 times, the game is definitely easier than the original. And I don't mean the breezy difficulty. And actually, I think the breezy difficulty is a great addition. The breezy difficulty makes bosses weaker, it makes action commands easier to execute, and it allows the player to hold more items, among other things. However, the game's normal mode, which is supposed to be very similar to the original, is much easier than its predecessor. Many reasons for that. First of all, single target attacks can now be blocked and therefore completely negated. There were a lot of unblockable magic attacks in the original that made the game incredibly painful. The most devastating was definitely Darkstar, which just did absolutely massive damage when it hit. And there used to be fights where it could get cast twice in a row, completely decimating 2 characters and leaving you in a tremendous rut. But now, if the enemy casts Darkstar, you can just breathe a sigh of relief while simultaneously clenching your butthole as tightly as possible, hoping you get the block. And I like that feeling. Not the butthole thing, but the feeling that you could actually have control over your fate. It gives you a lot more agency. However, the problem is that it makes many of the later bosses feel nerfed for anyone who can actually do the action commands well. But another thing, more skill-based attacks means that luck plays much less of a role in terms of whether or not you'll die. And while I do like using my skills to win more than just hoping for good RNG, this has taken some of the spontaneity out of the game. RNG can really help spice up the gameplay. Imagine Pokemon without critical hits. Imagine Fire Emblem without those 3% evasion chances. Imagine Genshin Impact without a random chance of flat defense artifact rolls. Okay, maybe forget that last one because that would be better. But we're getting away from the point here because there's another addition to this game that makes it easier. Splash damage, which occurs when you hit a physical action command perfectly, also nerfed one particular boss, the Tsar Dragon. This is a boss that can occasionally summon balls that explode and do a ton of damage. However, each ball only has 1 health point. That means that any splash damage completely destroys them. And maybe I'm overblowing this as someone who regularly does challenge runs, because at later levels, most characters have attacks that can hit all enemies, which would make these sort of not a big deal anyway. But it definitely made that battle in particular feel a lot easier. Too easy, I would say. And before I get roasted in my comments section, or maybe this will make me get roasted more, I'm not sure, let me say that I actually think these changes are not inherently bad. A slightly lower difficulty is a great way to get fans interested in this series, more casual fans who aren't sweaty tryharders like me. It can be more fun for those types of gamers. Some people really get turned off by games if they're too challenging. But do I think that the original was too challenging such that it couldn't be enjoyed by a casual gamer? No, absolutely not. The story is great, the playable characters are all Mario characters, but different. The new FMVs are great. This isn't me saying the game is bad. Don't think I'm saying that, please. But this game needs a hard mode. It needs it. And the big question is, how should a hard mode work? First, characters and enemies should have a 5% chance of getting a critical hit on single target attacks. This would make them deal double damage, and a perfect block would make the attack do 25% of its original damage. That would still allow the player to mitigate the extra damage, but adding just a little bit of variance since there's very little RNG in this game to begin with. Really, the only RNG is the chance that your attack will miss. Second, just get rid of splash damage in the hard mode. It doesn't add much, but in the one battle it does something, the Tsar Dragon just dies. It completely trivializes that battle. And actually there's one more battle that it also sort of trivializes, and that's the Punchinello fight, because the splash damage does a pretty good job of taking care of the bombs, especially if you're using all characters and not doing what I do and just using one. And the third thing they should do is nerf status effects on enemies just a bit. When a status effect hits an enemy, especially a boss, it can just completely invalidate them. For sleep, just do what Pokemon does. Give enemies a random chance of waking up on turns 1 to 4. That way you can't just know when they're gonna wake up and negate that wake up with another sleep attack. Then make poison do half the damage on all enemies. Similarly, have the effects that fear has on enemies. And in terms of mute, I don't know what I would do with this status effect, but I don't think it's that impactful. Enemies can already run out of FP, which makes it so they can't cast spells anyway, so I don't know. But maybe the AI could use an upgrade, because a lot of the time those enemies that run out of FP will use their FP attacks. Why don't they just attack? Why are they too stupid to just attack when they have no FP? I wouldn't do that. And I feel like that would be kind of a simple change, right? Like, just don't let them use FP attacks if they don't have FP. Don't make them waste a turn. Which brings me to my next point, which is that why are you having bosses run out of FP? That doesn't make sense to me. Certain enemies like Valentina and Culex and Knife Guy and Great Guy are completely nerfed when they run out of FP. It kind of ruins the challenge of a fight. I do think there is one exception, which is that Culex's gems should definitely be able to run out of FP, because that mechanic of stalling them out of FP is often much easier than just killing them. But I don't know, maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they shouldn't. Tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. Culex himself though, why does he run out of FP? He's a super boss. Super bosses shouldn't run out of FP. I also have some other things to say about the combat mechanics. Let me just start with the triple attacks. I don't particularly like the way a lot of these have been structured. I like the idea of them, I just like to see a bunch of revisions. And no, not because they just make the game easier, because a hard mode would negate that, right? That's the whole point. But anyway, let's go through them one by one. Mario, Mallow, and Geno's triple attack is a powerful strike on one enemy, and that overall makes sense given their varied abilities. I do like this move, but considering this is already an extremely magically potent team, the fact that this only does damage kind of annoys me. Later in the game with a Geno boost, all three characters can do a similar amount of damage with their skills. However, given Mallow's healing abilities, I would make this skill heal the party for half of their maximum HP, and that would allow them to do damage even if they're injured and save one turn. And it can do a smidge less damage to compensate for that. And since Mallow can only heal one character at a time normally, this makes perfect sense to me and would buff this team a lot. And I'll be honest, this team kind of needs buffing. Yes, it's a good team, but I would normally just replace Mallow with Peach. She can heal better, and she can also do good physical and magical damage once she hits level 18 and can use Psych Bomb. And by the way, speaking of replacing characters, I made a tier list of all the characters, so if you're curious about my thoughts on that, I'll put a link to that in the Discriddly-Deedly-Doo. And if you want to see a team tier list, let me know in the comments. That's something I've been thinking about for a while. Mario, Mallow, and Bowser use the Clown Car Barrage attack, which attacks all enemies with fire, ice, and lightning, and if the enemy attacked is weak to any of those, this attack hits their weakness. It ignores their resistances. This is probably the one triple attack that I wouldn't change. There are so few ways to hit enemies with elements in this game, which I'll talk about later, and giving an attack that does all three, particularly with Bowser in the party, is awesome. Bowser can't hit enemies with any elements, so to give him an attack that lets him do that adds a ton of utility. And since Bowser and Mario have no supportive utility except maybe Bowser's Terrorize spell, I don't know if that's support, it's really a debuff, but it sort of is supportive, I guess. Anyway, since they don't have supportive utility, it just makes sense that this team's triple attack just does more of what they do better. Now, Mario, Geno, and Bowser can use Shooting Star Shot, which does good damage to enemies and supposedly boost your allies. However, I haven't been able to figure out what that boost is. It's not a Geno boost. Do not tell me it's a Geno boost in the comments. I tried it out. It doesn't do Geno boost levels of damage when this happens. Like, maybe I would feel better if the boost were explained. The boost isn't explained. As it stands, I think this attack could be better, and here is how I would change it. Geno already has Geno boost, so it's redundant to make this attack have a boost. Instead, have it make the enemy skip a turn, as if Bowser's Terrorize attack has had a larger effect. That way, you can get an extra moment to boost up, attack, or heal. Whatever you need to do to support your team or damage the enemy if everyone is healthy and already boosted. Because if Geno's in the party, you're gonna boost everyone with Geno boost if you're playing optimally. Now, similarly, Mario, Geno, and Peach get Spare Us All, which is a triple move that prevents the team from taking damage from just one attack. And Geno boost already sort of makes everyone unkillable. This move is probably better used on Mario, Mallow, and Peach, which is a more physically squishy team that would really benefit from each character dodging an attack. And Mario, Mallow, and Peach get Healing Rainbow, which heals all allies to full health and revives anyone who is dead. And while I wouldn't change this skill itself, this is not the triad that I would give it to. I would give it to Mario, Geno, and Peach instead. Peach already has the comeback spell, and Mallow has some healing himself, meaning that longevity is the last of that team's issues. But you can now also switch characters into battle, meaning if you want to use Healing Rainbow, the best way to do it is just to use Geno, Bowser, and Mario, and then when Geno and Bowser die, you just switch in Peach and Mallow and go to town. You revive everyone, including Geno and Bowser, and you're sort of back to square one. And I do think that overall, the in-battle switching mechanic is a welcome one. In the original game, Peach was absolutely necessary to have in battle at all times, but now you can just switch her in when you need her. Do I think this is the best way to play? No, I do not, because Peach still does great damage with a frying pan and with Psych Bomb, but it's at least more viable without pulling your hair out because someone died and you're on your last pick-me-up, because you can just switch Peach in, have her use comeback, and revive the character instead. But the switch-in mechanic does bring up one question. Why can't we switch out Mario? I want to try Bowser, Geno, and Peach. How about Bowser, Geno, and Mallow? That'd be a really cool team. Mario isn't that important, and while it's hard to outdamage him, other characters can in the right circumstances. I get that he's the main character. I get that. But there are other RPGs where you can just switch out the main character. Think about Chrono Trigger, where later in the game you can just switch out Chrono whenever you want. And Chrono Cross lets you do that as well, albeit only in a New Game Plus. I get it. But still, you can do it. And Final Fantasy X just lets you switch out anyone anytime you want, as long as you have more than 3 party members. And I'm sure there are more examples of this, but the point is that more flexibility means more fun. Maybe just make it so that once you complete the game once, on your next run through you can switch out Mario so that you can just have fun playing with just any characters you want. And speaking of sort of a New Game Plus mode, which is another thing the game should have, in a new game after you've completed the game, you should be able to just use whatever character you want. Even if Mario's still going to be the leader because of his jumping, you should just let us play with Peach from the very beginning so I can do a Peach only run. I know, I'm biased, I'm a challenge runner, I want to be able to take the other characters out of the party, but let me do it. Why not just let me do it? Let me have just one character in the party if I want to. It's my party, let me do it. I want to try a challenge, let me do it. You could just make it a challenge mode, only one character. It'd be great. Don't force me to have 3 characters either, just let me take everyone out of the party. It's a greedy request, but I stand by it. Hi, kitty. Ori, come here. All right, whatever. But let's circle back to specials, because I also have some issues with those. Now, the game was extremely faithful to the original and kept text 1-to-1 exactly the same, but I think a couple of characters could use some makeovers. That being said, Mario is the one character that I wouldn't change at all. He has access to the fire and jump elements in his moveset, and his jump attack becomes extraordinarily powerful. Particularly in the late game when many enemies are weak against jump, he's pretty amazing. Now, Mallow could use... Hi, come here. Now, Mallow could use just one change. The HP... Oh! Okay, that was a bad idea. Now, Mallow could use just one change. The HP Rain healing attack should heal status effects in addition to healing HP. That would give Mallow a lot of extra utility, and he could equip the safety ring and be a better cleric. All of his other spells, though, absolutely perfect just the way they are. Don't change them. He has access to thunder and ice, and that's really all he needs. Bowser, though, definitely needs an adjustment. Terrorize and Poison Gas are excellent choices, and while they don't do much damage, their status effects can be game changers, especially on bosses. Bowser Crush is actually pretty potent as well, especially against bosses that have high physical resistance. But the one spell of his that I would change is Crusher, and I would change that to Fire Breath. It would be a fire spell that does moderate fire damage to a single enemy. That would make Bowser the only unit besides Mario who has access to fire. Because Crusher can't hit weaknesses, it's basically useless because Bowser's magic attack is so low. A strong single target fire spell would be very welcome and would complement his physical damage perfectly. Geno Boost is extremely overpowered, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It's still balanced because it only boosts one character. It's honestly the thing that makes Geno amazing. But Geno Blast and Geno Flash are effectively the same. They just do non-elemental damage to all enemies, with Geno Blast being a little bit weaker. I would replace Geno Blast with a stronger version of the Thunderbolt spell. Geno came from the sky. It makes sense that he'd be able to maybe call lightning down from the sky. Makes sense, right? And that would make him the only character besides Mallow who would be able to do lightning damage. But let Mallow be the only one who can do ice damage. I think that's fair. And finally, my favorite character in the game, Peach. Why they gave Peach both Therapy and Group Hug makes no sense to me. Therapy is just a worse Group Hug. So I would switch Therapy to a move that I'll call Peach Bump. That would be a hip bump, kind of like in Super Smash Bros. That does non-elemental magic damage to a single enemy. Just a small amount, so she has some sort of magical prowess early in the game. Comeback should stay exactly the same, and Mute has some utility on bosses, and that's fine. It can stay the same. But as for Sleepy Time, that spell is broken with regard to Gun Yoke. I talked about that in my Minimum Battles video. I'll link that in the describbly-do. Watch that after this one. It's really fun. But anyway, the Sleepy Time spell features sheep falling from the sky, so here's how I think they should change it. It can still put enemies to sleep, but if an enemy is already asleep or is immune to sleep, it should do jump elemental damage. And Psych Bomb, of course, should stay exactly the same. Now, notice that the way I've arranged it, Mario and Mallow, who previously were the only characters who had access to elemental spells, are now just the only characters who can use 2 elements at once. Everyone else now has has a spell that can hit for one type of elemental damage, so everyone gets a little bit more versatile. But there's one more thing that this game needs to shake things up. Some new characters. Character number one, who I think is the most obvious character you can put in this game, is Rosalina. She's already star-themed, so you could imagine that she comes down to help out Geno. Her role would be mainly magic attacker with a spot of support. Naturally, she'd be recruited at Star Hill, and she would act as a hybrid between Mallow, Geno, and Peach. Her stat spread is more magically offensive focused than Peach's, but with less HP and defense. She'd just be a glass cannon. And she also would get some techniques to mitigate that weakness. Her first technique would be Starfall. Similar to Rasley's Razdar from Chrono Cross, this tech would be a single target spell that sends a Luma down from the sky, dealing single target jump damage. This would give another character a jump element attack and make the party more versatile. Her second technique would be called Star Shield. Similar to Mario, Geno, and Peach's triple attack, this would create a one-time shield for a single character that would have the damage from one attack and do a small amount of counter damage, but it would only do that damage if the character hits their action command for defense. And if they hit it perfectly, the shield can actually stay up. This could, of course, be removed by any non-blockable attack, and it would not protect against instant death attacks. And it would also stack with Geno Boost. Her third spell is called Spin Star. While there are 6 main status effects in this game, Fear, Mute, Sleep, Poison, Scarecrow, and Shroom, there's one more semi-hidden status effect that hasn't been explored: Confusion. You really only see this status effect on the orange lizards and on Bowser's minions in his castle when he isn't in the party. So this attack would deal medium non-elemental damage to all enemies with a power level similar to Mario's Super Flame, and it would have a 50% chance of confusing them. Her fourth spell would be called Star Heal. It would heal about half the party's HP, and with action command would give Rosalina and party a 10% damage boost to her next attack. And her final move is called Starbeam. With this tech, Rosalina would do large thunder elemental damage to all enemies. However, the power level of this spell would be about 3/4 the power of Shocker. That would allow the game to remain balanced. I'm kind of mid on this one, but I think as a magic attacker, she does need to have a second element. As for weapons, Rosalina uses wands and dolls. And here are a few very crude designs I made in Paint. For wands, the initial flick would hit the enemy, and the action command would let her swish and shoot a little star. And similar to Final Fantasy X's Lulu, she would use dolls that depict the characters in the game. They would walk over and strike, and the action command would make them strike twice. Her ultimate weapon would be the Golden Toad doll, which just seems right, honestly. Character number 2 that I want to added is Yoshi. He's already in the game, so it really does make perfect sense. And his weapon, of course, would be Boots. And his most powerful weapon would be the Spiked Boots. Their first spell would be Egg Toss, which would do small non-elemental damage. Enough said. The second spell would be Eat. Yoshi can swallow an enemy similarly to what happens when a Yoshi cookie is used, and if the enemy is killed, they turn into an item. If they aren't killed, he turns them into an egg and does a very small amount of non-elemental damage. A way to get Yoshi AIDS, maybe? The third spell would be Yoshi Spit. Yoshi sucks up an enemy and then spits it out. If there's more than one type of enemy in battle, then the swallowed enemy and the enemy you spit the eaten enemy at both take damage. And depending on what type of enemy he ingests, he does different types of elemental damage, kind of like in Super Mario World, how if you swallow a red shell, you spit out fire, if you suck up a yellow shell, you stomp, that sort of thing. So allowing Yoshi to do any kind of elemental damage. Maybe they could even vary it so that certain types of enemies would explode and do damage to everyone. I don't know. I'm not sure about this one, but I really like the idea. I think it's cool. And the fourth and final spell would take a note from Yoshi's stomp attacks and do large jump damage to a single enemy. And the final character that I think should be in the game, I am really freaking excited about. We'd need a crossover between this game and Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, since we're gonna get a remake of that one coming soon. And after careful consultation with my boyfriend, I've decided that this character should be you when you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, no, seriously, this character should be Ms. Mowz. Her main ability in Thousand Year Door is slapping, so she could use basically the same weapons as Peach, the slap clubs, and she could also use boots similar to Yoshi. And her ultimate weapon would be the silver gloves, which allows her to do what she does best: slap the shit out of her enemies. And her techs. Oh, you're gonna love this. I'm so excited. Her first ability would be called Swipe. I'm guessing you know what this is gonna do. It would allow her to steal an item from an enemy. And this would be a good way to get literally the best item in the game. I don't mean red essences, forget about those, they make the game boring. I mean Yoshi aids. These have the same effects as both a bracer and an energizer. Okay, technically a party bracer and a party energizer could be considered better because they can do the same thing in fewer turns, but whatever. I play solo runs, so I only really care about boosting one character. That's just me. Normally you have to do this stupid minigame in Race Bashi, and then you feed Yoshi cookies to the fat Yoshi and you hope the RNG hits and it doesn't, you have to save scum. I mean, just take that out of the game. We don't need that. Just let Ms. Mowz steal the things. The super powerful ninjas at the end of the game are a perfect enemy to give this to since they kind of suck and this would actually give you a reason to fight them. I usually just skip them entirely. I hate them. Her second ability would be Heal Bounce, where she'd bounce on all enemies once, doing moderate jump damage to them, which makes sense because she wears high heels, so she can just like ram into them with her stiletto. Love it. The third ability would be called Mowz Kiss. She'd heal one character to full HP and give them a 10% increase in damage for the next attack, because her kiss motivates you, you know? And to add to this mechanic, Ms. Mowz could kiss someone off-field, immediately bringing them in for the next round. Currently, the only way to heal off-field characters is with a triple attack, but this mechanic could be really cool. And the fourth spell would be called Mowz Beam, which would do high non-elemental damage to one enemy. Simple enough and isn't really branded for Ms. Mowz, but I bet you could do it with kisses, right? Just have a bunch of kisses coming out, or hearts, like a heart beam. And spell number 5, her best, would be Mowz Pass. This would allow Ms. Mowz to act like a dancer in Fire Emblem, donating her turn to another character so they can do literally whatever they want. This plays into Ms. Mowz's supportive capabilities and creates a role that doesn't exist yet. Now granted, you could just switch someone into act instead of Ms. Mowz, but this allows her to stay in the battle, and that can allow for some more interesting strategies. For example, an initial donation of turns to Geno could allow you to boost faster, or if there's an enemy weak against Thunder or Jump, you could donate a turn to Mallow or Mario respectively. Or if your party is in dire straits, you could donate a turn to Peach to use a group hug, which means of course this could work on someone off field as well and immediately bring them in. I feel less confident about these ideas now that I think about them. If you enjoyed this video, watch this one on screen. It's me playing through Super Mario RPG with only Mario. Thank you for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you.